Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Real Life, Real Love. I am your host, Sarah Michelle, and today is going to be our last episode for this season. So I have invited in Sara Rausch to speak with us. She's a doctor of chiropractic, and she also has like many other certifications and stuff. And I really wanted her to be here to talk with us today because a lot of our viewers and listeners have experienced significant trauma through relationships in the past. And we talk a lot about how emotionally we need to work through those things and spiritually we need to move through them and stuff so that we have space to call in newer, healthier relationships. But one of the reasons I wanted Sara to talk here is part of the process is what do you do physically to move through that trauma? How do you move through it in your body? How do you physically heal your body? And one of the things I love about this subject is it's feminine. It's feminine to work physically with the body. But a lot of us, maybe just because of what's available online or whatever, a lot of us naturally gravitate to mindset work first. And it's important. And I definitely do my own mindset work, but I think it's very important to work with the body. And I find it more fun. I feel like it gives me a break from all the mental processing and the stress that can come along with that, the overthinking, the anxiety, things like that can come with it. I also find when I'm too much in my head, I lean towards perfectionism. And then there's a lot of negative self-talk. I love getting into my body. So Sara, do you want to take a moment and just kind of share whatever you want to about yourself, who you are, your background, and then we'll hop into the conversation around all of this.
Sure. So I actually, facilitate, I guess, a Facebook called Naturally Nerdy. And so that really encompasses who I am. I look to do things as naturally and functionally as possible. And I'm always like learning new things and reading new things and getting new certifications. It's just fun for me. Even if I can't monetize it or, do anything with it, there's like always that one bit of information that I can use with one patient or with, refer a friend to or utilize in a podcast. So, I just like know a ton of stuff, especially in like the natural realm and a lot of like the physical healing. I really love movement and I really love nutrition. Those are two things that I've been really jamming on a lot lately.
Yeah, we're going to talk about nutrition in a minute and how it relates to this. But before we do that, you mentioned function.
Yeah.
That's something I wasn't aware of, didn't understand the topic until I met you and heard you talking about it. So could you share just a little bit?
Yeah, for me, function is like hard to explain, I guess.
So let's start with how you showed it in my life.
Sure.
And then you can like add any sort of anecdotes. Anecdotes. I was like, wait a second. You can add anything you want to it, science, whatever. But the first time I remember talking to you about it is I was complaining because the person I was with wanted my kids dressed in jeans. And I was like, my kids hate wearing jeans. And I said, I even hate wearing jeans, so I never try to make them. And you're like, well, that's because they're not functional. And that's when I first started thinking about like how my clothing either allows me to move through the day or inhibits me from moving. And that was just like one layer of listening, getting back into my body, listening to my body and becoming aware of stuff. Another time that you spoke to me about it was when I was telling you how much I hated certain types of exercise. And you're like, well, of course, because when you go to the gym and you're just like lifting this weight this way or whatever, you're like, how does that apply to your life? How does that help your life? There's so much sunlight coming in right now.
Yeah.
It's like in my eyes. Sorry about that. You're like, well, of course, like you're never going to move that way. That's not how you carry groceries into your house. That's not how you shovel the snow off your drive. That isn't how you pick up your kids, that sort of stuff. You're like, of course, you're going to want some movement that actually helps you feel healthy moving in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really, it's like making things fit your life and your goals and your yeah, like just how you're going to live your life. I would also even extrapolate it to like more natural movement, more natural consequences, more, like we use functional footwear, so there aren't high heels on it. Your toes can splay. It's more like a natural movement of how the foot should be. I set up my house fairly functionally, like it's fairly minimalist, and like my dining room is my homeschool area. And so it's not decorated real pretty and feminine and all the things. I do have areas in my home in which I've done that, like my bedroom, so it's more serene and whatnot. But like my living room, like under my TV stand, for instance, I know a lot of people have like knickknacks and pretty things that say joy and all of those things. We have homeschool books because it's just more functional for us to have that space utilized in that way. And in my yard, I have like a front yard garden, and I have chickens in the backyard. And so it's just like a functionally used space. And we can still enjoy it and have fun. It's just we try to use every nook and cranny the best that we can.
Okay. Is my sound coming through weird to you?
No.
Oh, I was just hearing some. Anyway, doesn't matter. As long as it's recording, fine, we're good. Okay, so let's talk about what we came here to talk about today.
Yeah.
So when people go through any sort of trauma, but in specific, we're going to be talking about like bad relationships in the past, whether that includes physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, like any sort of things like that, or maybe someone like cheated on you and then everything unraveled from there or whatever. Like there was a significant issue. It can throw our body into that fight or flight or fawn or freeze. I guess there's some added to that now, but like activate our central nervous system, right?
Yeah.
Autonomic nervous system. Is that what I want to say?
Yeah, I mean, they're both. Yeah.
Same? Yeah? Similar?
Autonomic is part of central nervous system. So yeah.
Okay, you can correct me. Well, the reason I was saying that is because isn't parasympathetic part of it as well? And we're not talking about that. We're actually talking about moving.
Sympathetic and parasympathetic, yeah.
Right? Because it's that activated response that's making us function from a state of stress instead of a state of relaxation. And so I wanted you to share a little bit today about how people who are going through this and taking the steps, maybe they're going to therapy, maybe they have a coach, maybe they're doing mindset work, reading personal development books, that sort of stuff to try to get through the emotional part of it. What can they do physically to support themselves to like regulate not regulate all hormones. We're not going to go to this. I mean, we could talk about that for months, right? But like cortisol in particular is a hot topic that comes up a lot. Like what can they do to start bringing that back down and regulating it and just physically getting into their body?
Yeah. So I think that like when you're experiencing high levels of stress, and especially associated with trauma and or like in a relationship, I would say even like childhood trauma when that's first coming up and whatnot, I would say like there is a trust that's broken with yourself. Like how did you get or let yourself get in that position? How did you allow that to happen? And then having that concern, like, I mean, I did it once, it could happen again. I didn't see the signs. I ended up in that position. And so there's that, like, can I trust myself to move into another relationship and not end up in that position again? And so I think that anything that we do physically has to be something, and I would say even emotionally, that we can sustain and create trust within ourselves. And so I think there's always these knee-jerk reactions, especially when it comes to physical things, like to make this laundry list of things that I should do to make myself healthier. I need to exercise for 1 hour every single day. I need to eat no carbohydrates. I need to, like da 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 da. Yes. And it's not sustainable. And then you just keep breaking trust with yourself. Because we're human, and eventually like all of those things aren't going to work out. And so I actually read this book. It was a long time ago. I can't even find it. I mean, I can Google it, but I don't even know where I read it. It's called Tiny Habits. And I think it's beautiful because this guy literally said he would do, like his goal would be to do one push-up every day. And by making that goal, it was never too overwhelming. And he was always able to accomplish it. Like even on days when he would get into bed and he'd be like, oh, crud, forgot to do my one push-up. He could like get himself out of bed because it was just one push-up. But he said that he found that in that he would many days be like, well, I can do more than one. I'm already on the floor. Why wouldn't I do 5 or 6 or 7? And then it would turn into like, well, I mean, like that felt pretty good. So maybe I'll do 10 squats too. And so I think that finding something, whether it's, one push-up or it's I'm going to drink 1 glass of water in the morning before I drink my coffee. I'm going to make sure that I have protein with every breakfast or like every meal. I'm going to make sure I eat breakfast, but only picking one of those things that you're going to do for a week or 2 weeks and make it small so that you're able to accomplish it every day without it adding more stress. And once that feels like it's good and you can like settle into it, then you can think about adding another tiny little thing. But that builds trust in yourself, which also then helps to lower cortisol.
That's how I teach clients to meditate is, well, first I usually look at their human design to kind of figure out what type of meditation they're likely to enjoy. And we start there because I think a lot of people resist meditation because they have this Buddhist monk sort of idea of meditation and they can't quiet their mind. So then they get frustrated, feel like they're failing, and don't want to do it. And it becomes one more task instead of something that's pleasurable for their day. So I always teach it's called the Magic Minute. I had a coach teach me it a long time ago. I know it's from someone. I just don't know the original source of it. But it's just where you set a timer on your phone for 1 minute the first time that you do it. And you slowly breathe in and breathe out and you just count your breaths. So for me, I know that 4 breaths when I'm relaxed like that is approximately a minute. So then I don't have to get out my phone. I don't have to do anything. If I'm sitting waiting to pick my kids up from school, I know that I can do my 1 minute of meditation for the day and I don't have to have anything with me. I literally just count my breaths. And when I get to 4, I trust that it's been a minute.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It takes all of the struggle out of it. But a lot of times, like you said, like I'll be there doing the breathing, or a client will tell me, like they're there doing the breathing, and it's like, well, this feels good. And so they'll stick with it longer than 4 breaths. So before they know it, they might have 3 to 5 minutes of meditation in, which is a significant amount of meditation.
Yeah.
If you're
or even finding like 3 or 4 different times throughout the day where you're doing that 1 minute, it's brilliant.
Yeah. And like you said, it's one of those things that if you made a commitment to do it, then you can still get to it by the end of the day. Because if you lay down in bed and you're like, crap, you can do it laying in bed. You can do it right? The other thing I was helping a friend with this recently because she was actually struggling to incorporate meditation in her day. And I was trying to explain to her, she's trying to make these changes with the intention of like, like I'm going to change my diet for this. And that's the way it's going to be for the rest of my life. Well, then you get all of these like fears, voices in your head, resistance and stuff coming up for you. And it becomes too challenging. Yeah. And you quit. And that's where you were talking about how you're breaking that trust with yourself because you signed yourself up for something that you can't possibly continue with. And I was explaining to her actually about how that works with masculine and feminine energy, that masculine energy is a linear thing and will continue forward like that. But she's feminine and she's trying to learn how to be in her feminine more, which cycles, which is in tune with the environment around you and adjusts and moves with everything, flows, right? So I suggested to her to just do 5 days. Whatever she does, commit to 5 days and then allow herself to take a break, keep going if she wants to, but take a break. And that's what I do now with my stuff. And it's not always 5 days. It could be whatever feels good to me, but something that is short. Because if you start doing 5 days of waking up and having protein for breakfast, even if you have a day or 2 off, you can easily tell yourself, okay, and we're going to do another 5 days now.
Yeah.
And as you start to feel the difference in your body and get that positive feedback, you're more likely to naturally choose it.
Yeah. I also really like thinking about like more like what can I add instead of what can I subtract, because I feel like it's like huge, like in nutrition. Do I need to remove all carbohydrates? Do I need to be a vegan? Do I need to blah 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 blah? The human body actually needs to have carbohydrates, protein, and fat, and it processes animal protein significantly better and utilizes it better in the body. And so I don't subscribe to even intermittent fasting for women, especially for any sort of time. I mean, obviously, if there's a like religious or cultural component to the fasting, like totally okay. I'm not saying nobody should ever do it, but I'm not sure that that should be like a way of life, because I used to intermittent fast all the time. And it's like, I've now learned it's a huge hormone disruptor because it is like a huge cortisol producer. Like when you wake up in the morning and you don't eat until lunch and you fasted all night, like the cortisol just spikes. And especially if you're a coffee drinker. So like if you wake up and the only thing that you're having is coffee, the caffeine spikes cortisol like hugely. Cortisol then goes and robs from progesterone. And then when we hear like estrogen dominance, it's generally not because people have too much estrogen. I'm not saying that's not possible, but it's usually because people are too low in progesterone because we have too much stress robbing from progesterone. And so breaking that stress cycle, and it's like the body doesn't differentiate stress. So like whether you go do an hour CrossFit workout or run a marathon or don't eat breakfast or get in a really big fight with your mom or whatever, it's all just cortisol release. And so your body's just like, okay, stress. And so when people are like, you need to lower your stress, you need to lower your stress, we automatically think, oh, I need to or like work with how much I have on my plate, and I need to meditate, and I need like that we think more of like the emotional stress. Mm-hmm. And that's like one of the hardest things to control sometimes, you know, like our kids have needs and our relationships have needs and we have jobs and busy schedules. And so sometimes it's hard to navigate those, but like, can we look for other ways to reduce cortisol release? Eating breakfast, eating enough protein, eat enough carbohydrates. Like I said, that's like carbohydrates are essential for our body. It's like the best energy for our bodies. And then, I mean, like when you really get into it, you can start looking at, you know, meal timing if you're like an athlete or something like that. But yeah, I just find like adding some, you know, I've written down a couple other things, but like making sure you get enough electrolytes. So that's again adding. So like, can I just add some healthy electrolytes to
what would be
water I'm already drinking?
Yeah, what would be a good way to add in electrolytes?
So you can just like add like sea salt to your water. I don't think that that's very good to drink because I'm just not really into salt that much. So I use LMNT, which is an electrolyte powder, and it still has like a little bit of a salty flavor to it, but it also gives you salt, potassium, and magnesium. You can Google adrenal cocktails. You could Google, you know, different ways to get electrolytes. Even putting some lemon and lime in your water will help a little bit. But yeah, so like it's just adding. It's something you're already doing. You're already drinking water. Throw some electrolytes in it. That balance also helps to, you know, regulate things within the body. I think like when we think about something like yoga, you have to go to a yoga studio. So you have to drive there. You have to spend $15 or $20 on a class, or you have to like find somewhere in your home where you can do it. And then it's like harder to motivate yourself to do it. So that seems really overwhelming. Could you do one yoga pose? Like, could you have a favorite yoga pose that you love to do and just do it for 30 seconds? And then, you know, that starts to feel so great. So maybe you do 2 yoga poses, and then maybe you find a 15-minute video that you love or something like that. So it doesn't have to be this big extreme commitment, but there's just, you know, little things that you can add throughout the day.
Yeah. So I just realized as you were talking, we've been talking about what to do when your cortisol levels are high, which is great. But how could someone become aware that their cortisol levels are too high without like needing to, confirm it through a blood test or something? Like, what's something that would make them think, ooh, maybe I should try this? Maybe that's what's going on with me.
I feel like most of us are running around with cortisol troubles.
That's fair.
You could be, and like it's never, I mean, like if you're feeling anxiety, if you're feeling, so I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but just recently, somebody was talking about their period and like the PMS symptoms that they had.
Mm-hmm.
But that's normal. And I was like, that's not normal. Like, that's not normal at all. Like, your period should be a non event. I mean, except for the obvious. Like, you must bleed. That is the, one thing that's required of a period and will never go away. But, you shouldn't be moody and you shouldn't have acne and you shouldn't have cravings and you shouldn't have cramps and, like all those things. And so, in my mind, when I hear a woman struggling with those things, it tells me that there's some sort of, shift in hormones. And you can look and see like the symptoms of estrogen dominance. I mean, if I see those symptoms, I can pretty much be guaranteed that we have low progesterone. And unless a woman is like in her 40s and 50s, where it would be more normal for that to happen as she's going through perimenopause, I would guess we're likely dealing with estrogen dominance, and it's likely due to low progesterone, and it's likely due to high cortisol. And how can we lower stress? But even if you don't have high cortisol, like you can still have that like lack of trust and that inability to move forward. I think that there's never a bad way or a bad time or like a bad reason to connect with your body and find ways that you can be more present and functional in your life.
Well, I love that you the lack of trust because I do talk about that a lot with clients from an emotional perspective. So I like that you're sharing how we can integrate that physically because there are a lot of women who have been cheated on, right? And then they're sitting there and they're worried that the next person, how can they prevent the next person from cheating on them? How can they make sure that the next person doesn't do it? And it's like, well, you can't. And trying to do that is going to just make you, well, you might even create it just because that's where your thoughts are always manifesting. But it's just going to disrupt your life and it's going to prevent you from having that true intimacy and connection with the next partner. And the real place to fix it is the trust with yourself. You mentioned something towards the very beginning of like that thought process of, well, I didn't see it before. What if I don't see it the next time? And disrupting that thought process and saying, I didn't see it before, but I know it now. So I trust myself that when I do see it, I'll take whatever action feels right to me then. Like I trust myself to handle things as they come in.
Yeah.
I trust myself to build a support system around me that helps me. That was one of the big things that came out of my divorce was I learned how to build my community around me so that I knew who I could reach out to and when, in what situations and stuff like that for help with different things. And it wasn't just like, oh, I have my mom and I have my best friend. And it certainly wasn't, oh, I need to go get another guy to fulfill this. Don't get me wrong. There was like a knee-jerk reaction in me.
Yeah.
Part of me that wanted to do that, but luckily I had enough, I had a coach and I had enough self-reflection and stuff to realize, okay, this is something we need to work on. I worked through it. But it is that. It's learning how to build that community around you so that even if that guy cheats on you, you know that you have people around you that if they're aware of it, they'll tell you. You have people around you that if you have to break off the relationship, move back out of his house, whatever these things are, like that you have people around you that can help you through all those things. So not only are you strong enough to do it yourself, but you can do it with relative ease. I was gonna say ease. It's not gonna be
Yeah.
fun,
Yeah,
but
no.
like if you have that support system around you, you can roll with the punches.
Yeah, like you'll survive. Like I've done hard things. I have trust in myself. I know that I'm going to get through this.
Yeah.
And so it just makes it, easier to,
Yeah, for
like the
sure.
emotional heartbreak and, that type of stuff. Like you just can't fix that part. But at least knowing like it's not as suffocating thinking about, well, I depended on him for this and this and this. And like,
And you never feel too
yeah.
because you know that you always have options.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything else you want to share?
Gosh.
I feel like we're at a good stopping point. It's totally cool if you want to stop. You mentioned you had notes and stuff, and I was like, I don't want to cut this episode off if you're like, hey, there was something that I really wanted to talk
No,
about.
I only made notes of like just different like tiny habits, so yeah,
Okay.
and if anybody wants any suggestions or anything, they're free to reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah, we'll be sharing some of those links in the description below this video. So if anybody wants to join her Facebook group, Naturally Nerdy, I'm in there. You can join that. Of course, follow her on any social media if you're interested in this content, which you must be if you're still here. Thanks. But yeah, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the station. We will be continuing to put out content even on the break from the podcast episodes, and then we'll be starting up another season here in a couple of months with all new content. So please stay in touch with us, and thanks for joining us. Yeah, thanks.